Welcome, everybody. Morning. We are ready to start. Chair will note the existence of a quorum. We have perfect attendance again this morning. You guys are great. Please let the minutes reflect the names of the members who are present. Does anybody have any proposed changes to the draft agenda that has been previously circulated?
And move approval of the agenda.
Thank you, Ellen.
I'll second it.
Okay. Not hearing any opposition or suggested changes. We will consider the agenda adopted by unanimous consent. Approval of the minutes of the September 10, 2025 meeting. That was previously circulated. Anybody have any proposed changes to the minutes?
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Second, okay. Hearing no requested changes or opposition, we will consider the minutes of the September 10, 2025 meeting adopted by unanimous consent. Moving into the chair's report. As you know, we've had 3 vacancies on our commission for quite some time. You should see, we expect tomorrow to see the agenda posted for next week's council meeting. And we also expect that agenda to list on it the names of 3 nominees who have been put up before the council by the county executive for confirmation to fill our 3 vacancies. So you can go, I'm not going to out them at the public meeting until that is published. You can go look at that. But we expect the confirmation to occur next week. And then they will attend as commissioners at their first meeting next month.
Oh, wonderful.
And it is great. I was very pleased that we will have a full commission as we consider and vote on the issues that are coming up for our next report.
Do they bring baked donuts, or do we bring baked donuts?
You're at home. It doesn't matter. I'm the only one who want to eat them, and Sherry here. So, you know, it doesn't matter. Maybe they'll airmail thing.
I already bought donuts. They're downstairs if anyone wants to grab one.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That's you're a swell guy. So, I will note we have an attendee from the public here this morning. We will welcome. I won't put them on the spot to ask them to speak, but it's always nice to see public participation. All right, we will move into our substantive part of the agenda. We have our budget reserves work group, who I understand have been meeting privately and having some discussions. And I will tell you, I put some suggested discussion questions in here. Don't feel compelled to follow those. There's some things I thought of that would be nice to at least talk about today, but I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Jeff and Dylan to lead off our discussion about this issue. I did put some background in the agenda, just as a reminder of where we are and what the issues seem to be. And the only thing I'd ask is that we all keep in mind that we're at the point where we really now need to make it a firm and final decision about whether we are or are not going to have a public listening session on November 19th. If we feel we're ready for that and we feel we have something concretely to put before the public to comment on. If we don't, that's fine. I think there will still be time if we decide to delay it. We could still have a public listening session in January, I think, weather permitting, or we could just do it online if it doesn't. And, you know, we had a public listening session in March when we did our first report. And it was cutting it a little close and didn't give us a lot of time, but we only had, you know, a handful of people participate. So we do have a little leeway, not a lot. If we really feel we'll be better prepared to present something to the public, we could do that. So I will let you kick it off, Mike, Dylan, Jeff, David, and take it away.
Okay, I think where we left it last month was that we were going to, as a work group, continue to look at the issue, research the issue, invite members, staff members from the executive and the council to discuss, to engage with us, to find out what their thoughts are, what their receptivity is for some sort of charter amendment or change or update. At this point, we haven't been able to schedule those meetings. I continue to be hopeful that it'll occur in the next say several weeks or a couple months. But in the meantime, I've been doing a little bit more research into what other counties have done with respect to the reserves. Their charters are much more expanded, let's say, or expansive in the governance and the procedures associated with the reserves. I think there's some instructions, instructive information that we can pick up from those charters to help inform us as we make some decisions as a commission and explain it to the commission, to the council and the executive as to what our thoughts are. I think, there's several principles associated with governing reserves that make sense for any organization, regardless of where the governing structure lies. One is that the reserves should be budgeted annually. Okay, one could argue that reserves are surpluses left over after expenses are subtracted from revenues. So that's kind of a backdoor way of figuring out, okay, how much surplus do you have? And that gets put into a reserve, so-called reserve account. But I think it should be more proactive, and I suspect that the executive and the council would agree with that principle, that it should be a thoughtful discussion as to how much the reserve should be, whether it's 5%, 10%, higher than 10% of some a denominator, that should be a thoughtful process, and that should be a goal. I think the council, between the charter and the county code, have some sort of goal in mind, and it is changing from year to year. It does change from year to year. So a budgeted, a formal, perhaps, budget process for determining reserves, and perhaps that should be codified in the charter. Okay, so that's one thought. Another principle for me is that the reserves should be comprehensive. Right now, they're, as Jim ably put in our minutes, or in our agenda for this month, and we discussed last month. Right now, the reserves are governed basically in two spots, in the charter and the county code. Over the years, it's the county charter amount has become outdated. So the target is 5%, but the vast majority of reserves, and again, as I said last month, the numbers don't really matter to us, but it is, we do have to recognize it's a significant amount. It could approach $1 billion, $1 billion. So it is a significant amount. And right now, the vast majority of those reserves are being governed by procedures in the county council, by the county council and the county code, not in the charter, perhaps as envisioned back in 1968 when the charter was developed. So a principle is that the reserves in total, the governance structure doesn't necessarily have to be all in one governing document, but it needs to be thought of as a comprehensively. Okay, I think personally, and perhaps you all, the commission, council, and executive would agree that there should be some formal appropriation process to disperse the reserves. Right now, there is a procedure that seems to be almost ad hoc in how the county council accesses the reserves. And last year it was, we could research it, and this is perhaps a subject for a different commission meeting, but the reserve, some amount of reserves were used last year, or for this particular fiscal year, to help supplant some of the expenditures needed for one of the expenses in the county. And one could argue that it was an ad hoc type of thing, and in order to meet a short-term need, not necessarily as originally envisioned as a typical use of a reserve amount. So perhaps there should be some rules associated with some guidelines, guardrails associated with how the funds are appropriated in the various reserve accounts. There's no, in the charter, there's, as you know, it's a small section, section 310. There's no vote limit discussed. I believe it was Howard, or maybe it's Prince George's County, has a 2/3 vote requirement for accessing the reserve accounts. The charter is silent on that. So that's seems to be an area that we do need to look at, think about, discuss. And then a numerical target. Right now, the charter says 5%. It's not historically in the last X number of years, it has not been maintained at 5%. So does that say that a numerical amount should not be it should be some sort of rather than a hard target, maybe described in the charter as a goal, rather than a hard target, minimum or a ceiling. So I think there's different opinions about that, but it seems to be a fruitful area for us to discuss. Okay, so that's my overview. I like personally, if Jim, if you're okay with it, I'd like to turn it over to Dylan. Dylan, I'm sure, has been busy in his day job, but I'm glad to see him attending this meeting and be curious to hear what his thoughts are.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So I think that before the commission today is whether the commission is interested in this as a topic, and I would put out that we don't have to finalize the details. In fact, we shouldn't finalize the details before any listening session, but we should articulate what areas we think are interesting for review. And I would suggest that the commission consider whether it's ready to make this kind of articulation along these lines. The commission is interested in looking at this issue of the reserve, and the commission is interested in two areas in particular: whether or not there should be a minimum set in the charter, and whether or not there should be a process for appropriation set in the charter. I think if the commission is interested in that much, as vague as that is appropriate to go into a listening session. I don't think we should hash out the very details going into a listening session, because that would make the listening session disingenuous. I mean, if we go in there saying we're interested in 2.75% and exactly this process, then the people there's nothing for them to contribute. If we go in and say we're interested in this topic and these are the two areas we're looking at in this topic, then of course people can then offer their proposals or their suggestions, and we can genuinely take those suggestions as part of the conversation, having not staked out a position. So that's my thoughts, and I'll open that up to the group to see what other people think about that. Maybe, chime in now.
So I'm with you, Dylan. I'm of the keep it simple, stupid thing. And I don't think we need to be going into a lot of detail in a listening session. I think one of the things that I brought this issue up originally, and my thing was about whether we need to have a higher minimum as opposed to a cap of 5%. The fact that the county is by council action adding more reserves into their revenue stabilization fund doesn't alter the fact that I think the county should have a minimum minimum reserve level. The bond raters obviously feel that way. And so I think that's a valid question. And then, yes, do we want to have a formal process for the use of reserve funds? That's a valid question too. I'm okay with both of those. And this is the only things that we start talking about.
Are there any people who are negative on either of these aspects?
Well, I'm not negative, but I'm interested in hearing if there's a problem that we're trying to solve, or is this a theoretical argument?
No, I think there's a definite problem we're trying to solve. I mean, the bond agencies have said that we don't have enough money in our reserve capacity. So, you know, what we're interested in as an organization, that is the county organization, is having maximum stability and maximum access to capital. And so the bond agencies are a key part of that. And when when the auditors identify a problem like this, it behooves us to be involved in that problem. And then
But
also, the second thing I would say is fundamentally an organization like a county should not be leaving it to the players to decide year in, year out, you know, what kind of money we're going to have in the bank. We don't have the capacity to go into a deficit. You know, counties can't go into deficit. We have no idea what the future holds. Therefore, it behooves us to be as conservative as possible in terms of finances so that we make sure that we're not screwing ourselves in a future year that we can't yet envision.
right, but I think bond companies always say that.
Sure.
thing.
And they're bond
What
companies.
is
So
there a problem? Are there any services that should be met that aren't being met? And in other words, why do we have to? I'm looking for a problem that should be solving as opposed to just a theoretical argument.
Can I touch that one?
Sure.
So Howard, I think from my perspective, having worked in local government for many, many years, the problem is that if you don't have set reserves, if you can fluctuate them, then when you need them, okay, and they're not something you're touching every year necessarily. In fact, you may go years without touching them. But when you need them, if you do not have them, you're screwed. And so what we're trying to do here is say, we're going to have this county set up so we have the reserves we need when we need them. If we don't need them, great, awesome. If we do need them, we'll have them. And I think for me, that's why I brought this up in the first place. It's not an immediate problem. It's a potential future problem.
A potential, but it would seem that we've had the reserves that we need because I don't see staff saying that we have to do this, and I don't see the council from its hands-on experience saying that this has to be.
Because we've been lucky and haven't needed to have more.
Okay, but that's a subjective valuation.
I worked in Florida, so everything is up in the air, right? So
also, it would seem obvious that people who are in the process wouldn't want to be more restricted. And it would also seem obvious that people who have a long, you know, and I don't mean this in any kind of derogatory way, but politicians who are running the system, you know, obviously don't want to be restricted. But that's why we have a constitution, and that's why we have a charter
Then
to set the guidelines.
That's our form of government, that people elect leaders who make policy and then they pass on the policy. But Montgomery County is a world-class county. This is one of the most desirable places to live. And so we must be doing something right.
Yeah, no, but this is not a criticism. This is simply, you know, more perfect union.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Can I ask, I was say, Marvin, you just raised your hand. I was about to ask you, David, whether you had any leanings one way or the other, so I get a sense of overall whether where consensus is.
Yeah, having heard some of the conversation previously about why we might want to go in this direction, I was trying to look at the documents from the other counties to see whether or not there was anything that sort of touched on being able to have this my term tighter grip, I guess, in this regard. is there anything you can point to, Mike or Dylan, or David, in terms of, or Jeff, just in those particular ones that really catches your attention? I mean, I looked at the highlighted areas and all, but I don't know if I really was able to come up with something that really touches on what you all are saying.
I think that's why we don't want to get into the weeds right now. I think that's why we want to keep it very simple. That are you interested in codifying a minimum standard? Are you interested in codifying the process? They can be examples. Those two counties could be examples of how to do it, but not necessarily the be all and end all of this. So
Well, that's right. As you just to point out, for an example, Prince George's County, section 816.
Okay.
I know we don't want to get in the weeds, but just
Right.
real quick, section 816. The two things that stuck out at me is that there is a numerical target. They're shooting for 5%, I believe, of the general fund that would be available for emergencies. And they're defining emergencies as, a typical thing where revenues fall significantly. There's a structural issue, infrastructure issue that needs to be dealt with that's unpredicted. And the second thing that jumps out at me in section 816 is that there's a 2/3 vote requirement.
Okay.
So right now, we don't have any in the charter. This gets to the other point that clearly there's a disconnect between what the charter says, which is basically the governing document, versus what in practice, in reality, is actually going on. So maybe just that fact, if we don't even look at the dollars or whether there's been a problem with handling reserve issues in the past, there's simply a governance, a structural issue associated with the governing documents that needs to be corrected, needs to be updated.
I guess my point is,
Thank you.
why change? I mean, I guess that's my underlying question here. Has staff recommended that this be done to the council and been rejected, or is staff recommending this to us?
I think if, as we had the council president come before us, and we have had Gene, I forget anyway, one of the staff members handling the budget come before us. We've had staff members from the executive, Dale and perhaps others. And I think the bottom line, to be brutally frank, is that I think that this might be a heavy lift. Our discussion about reserves and modifying the charter this
Sure.
year might be a heavy lift. However, I think hopefully I'm saying I speak for many, if not all of us, that our task is to see areas where charter changes are necessary, appropriate, even desirable, and bring those issues to the council. So that's the guide.
I'll add something, we have a duty to file a report. Whether that report contains recommendations that are in the form of, generic recommendations, or whether they're in the form of a very specific charter amendment, that's up to us, right? I mean, if we feel strongly that we reached a conclusion, and we're free to state that conclusion, even if we haven't ironed out, specific details about the wording of an amendment, we can go as far as we like, but we're not restrained. We don't have to get all the way there in order to make a recommendation.
So just one additional point, the more you put in reserves, the less you can do. So if people want to do something, and you can't do that because the reserves made the reserves so high, so we can't take the trash cans, clean the trash cans in the park, or whatever the case may be, we'll just have to raise taxes. or take money away from the schools, or move the money around somehow. So I guess I'm reluctant to suggest a change of this magnitude unless there's a problem that we've had. That's what I'm waiting to hear. And
So the reality of the situation is that we would unlikely be suggesting a charter amendment that made the minimum higher than is already in council documents, council rules. What we're doing is ensuring us for a time in the future that we cannot see. So we don't know. I mean, the fact that we've had enlightened leadership up to now is no guarantee that we're going to have enlightened leadership in the future. The fact that we've had responsible leadership up to now is no guarantee that we just have to look at the national scene to know that the Constitution, i.e. the Charter in our case, is a safeguard for a day when we don't have responsible leadership. And so the fact that the county council is already putting aside more than the minimum that we're likely to suggest, or that maybe we will suggest, because I'm not going to, I don't know what the commission's going to come to in terms of a number, but it is already the case that the county puts aside an amount in the reserve that's probably higher than the 5% or 10% that we've been talking about. But we don't know that that's the case in the future. We can't just assume that in the future we're going to come to a situation, an unknown crisis, and have responsible leadership in the 5 years leading up to that unknown crisis. So it behooves us to prepare for that day, because if you don't prepare for the rainy day, you get wet. And getting wet in this what we're talking about is, that's the purpose of having governance, is so that we don't get wet in that rainy day that we can't foresee at this point. Good leadership is not a guarantee, especially in an elected situation. There's no reason to believe that forever we're going to have leadership who's going to, think of the future rather than current, short term, think long term rather than short term. So therefore it behooves us to structurally think long term, so that even in the case when we have irresponsible leadership, there is still a structural requirement or a structural requirement for responsibility.
But there is now. I mean, that's my point. I mean,
But there isn't now. No, now there's county council documents, which is governed by elected leaders, not charter requirements. So we're simply talking about codifying that which is, we're talking about. I mean, like I said, I don't want to prejudge what we're talking about. We're just talking about areas at the moment, but we're potentially talking about codifying stuff in the charter that is already practiced in county rules. But those county rules can be changed, and they are changed every year. We see them go in different places year to year. And, we don't want to be in a situation where the different place puts us in, different places. Okay, this year we're not going to put anything in the reserve because I want to have a big tax cut, or I want to have a big infrastructure project that may or may not be, may or not be in the long-term interest, but maybe in the short-term interest of some politician.
right, but determine, you get in with the politician. And all of this is determined by the dead hand of the past. Elected leaders, what you're saying, can't be trusted to do anything. People can't be trusted to elect the
No,
leader.
I'm not saying people can't be
So we
trusted. I'm
have to
saying
tie their-
we don't know we don't know now what the future holds.
Of course not.
Therefore, therefore it behooves us to create a structure that doesn't allow for the fickle finger of
But we
fate.
know what the past has produced since the charter. In fact, actually before the charter, but certainly since the charter in 1968, the system has proved capable of meeting the needs that have made this a first-class county. I'm just reluctant to make a change like this because you don't trust the voters in the future.
It's not about trusting the voters. It's about trusting the system to accomplish the goal that it's supposed to accomplish.
Greater faith in the system.
But the system has to accomplish the goal, right? And right now, the only structural thing that's said in there is a cap of 5%. So
Right.
if a council wanted to do it, they could say, we're going to put our 5%, and that's it. Well, then you get hit with a big thing, and 5% doesn't cover your peanuts.
Well,
If-
And
they
so,
could literally say 0%. It's a cap. It's not a minimum. They could
If-
say
if-
we don't this year. We don't want to have anything in
If
our.
they make a mistake like that, someone will jump up in the community and say, you're ruining the county. And I don't think we
not
should,
until after the fact, Howard. After that, you got no home because it got wiped out, right?
but you can make corrections in our form of government. That's more easily, I think, than trying to tie the hands repeatedly. Okay, that's the way I feel.
All right, so I'm going to ask Sherry and David if they have anything to add. No pressure.
Uh, what I am most, where my thinking is going is that, my area of interest is in aligning the language in the charter to match to prevent the council from doing this kind of creativity in shunting funds among other reserves. My concern with having too large a reserve is that the money is just going to sit there. I don't know if it's being invested. There are lots of what ifs that could wipe out a reserve, and there are lots of what ifs that are great. So I think trying to design for what ifs is just going to drive you mad. But what I am concerned about is aligning the language so that the charter provides enough flexibility and enough restraint.
David, your picture's briefly disappeared here, so I don't know. There you are.
Myself back up. I think we have sort of two issues to deal with, and one is risk management and a reserve to deal with risky situations, emergencies. And the other is sort of our property management or resource management, which is the capital that we own that wears out and needs to be replaced on a regular basis. That may be every 20 or 30 years for certain things. But those are recurring expenses that need to be budgeted, and there needs to be a process to plan for both. That the county has some effort on a regular basis to review what it owns and determine the life cycle, the expected lifespan of the major thing, whatever it may be, and then determine what fiscal year are we going to likely need to spend the money to replace this, and how much do we think that's going to cost us. And the other risk management is to sit down and imagine the unimaginable. There are people in eastern Tennessee who never thought they would ever be affected by a hurricane. But last year they were, because a hurricane come up and hit Tennessee and knocked down forests and caused a lot of flooding, a lot of damage. And those communities were hard hit because they didn't necessarily have the reserves to deal with the substantial damage that occurred. And I think that it would behoove the county to every year have a risk assessment done that looks at the major catastrophes that occurred within the country, look at what our risk is for a similar event, and then look at how well we would be prepared to deal with it, both at the operational level and at the level of having enough money in the bank to pursue recovery immediately and get things back to normal. So those are, to my mind, the two things that need to be focused on. And one of them, how old is your property and when you're going to have to replace it, is just a reserve study that's done occasionally and reviewed and looked at by whoever, actuaries or whoever else, to determine what you need to build into your budget and anticipate that you're going to know in advance, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, that you're going to have to pay for this thing. And you're committed to doing so, and you're putting the money in the reserves today because you know you're going to have to spend it that far in the future, as opposed to raising taxes in that particular year to just deal with that one large expense. And the other is just risk management. You know, we're sort of in a comfortable position here. We have not yet had major tornadoes come through and really rip the county up, though the possibility of that is getting worse and worse. And we haven't yet really been affected by any hurricanes. And those are two of the most devastating kinds of weather events that could befall us. You know, we've had snowmageddons, which really weren't that damaging to us. But I think that we need to both have a way to look at risks and figure out how to manage those, and look at our reserves as our property and figure out how to manage those long-term expenses. I have to say, just looking back at what Mike's presentation early on, I'm glad we hired the guy.
I remember one catastrophe when River Road became a river, and there was actually a fatality. People standing on their cars, and it was a catastrophe. And but I don't think the problem was lack of money.
Well, and that was a very localized emergency as well. It's not every county road flooded. It was just that one road. And the same with the I-95 issue a couple of years ago, where everybody got snowed in on I-95 and couldn't move. You know, that was very localized and very short term. And that didn't occur here in Maryland, it occurred down in Virginia. But that was another weather related event that was a little poorly planned for, or not planned for at all. And so those are the kinds of things that you realize we didn't have to worry about financing a solution, but we needed to look at how we operationally do a better job.
So we very clearly have a super majority of our members who would like to move this issue, keep it on our agenda, and to move it to the public agenda before we decide next February or March to push it to the council's agenda. That being the case, I think what we need to focus on is how we're going to accomplish that and when we're going to accomplish it. So the question is, so we have a date reserved for use of the council hearing room on November 19th. And our next meeting is November 12th, just about a week before that. So if we're going to move this to a public agenda and take advantage of the November 19th public hearing room, we would have to put out a notice. I think it's fair to give the public 2 weeks notice. I would hate to give them less than 2 weeks, and frankly, it would be better to give them a little more. But that means we would have to have a public notice written and issued and press released certainly before our next meeting, at least a week before our next meeting, maybe more. So we need to sort of contemplate how we will accomplish that, or whether we think we can, or whether we want to put it off until after the first of the year. Any thoughts on that?
What time on the 19th did you have in mind?
My understanding, and Stephen can correct me, was the room is ours for the day. It's up to us to pick the time frame.
The suggestion was like 1 to 3, but yeah, it is.
It's up to us.
It's up to you guys. Yeah,
Okay.
I think last time we did it 1 to 3.
But I think the question is you're focusing on, getting a public document in shape to issue that sort of frames this issue in a way the public can appreciate and actually come with meaningful thoughts and comments. So do we think we can be ready? Let's say that document would have to circulate for all of us to consent to it, sometime around Halloween-ish. Not that there's any connection between scary Halloween and this topic, but somewhere in there so that we could actually issue it in the first week in November.
I think there may be, actually. I'm already curious.
That was Howard. Okay.
Do you want suggested language submitted?
Well, I think the sort of the document is the frames, like, right, for the public, sort of, this is the question we're asking. This is what we want feedback on. Whether you want to go so far as to have examples, possibilities, comparisons to we obviously the county has a policy. I mean, one place to start is this is what the county's policy says, right? And, you know, this is why we think it makes sense to either move part of that policy into our governing document known as the charter, or whether we think it needs to be clarified or expanded, but, you know, we're talking about whether or not we want to put some of this or more into our charter document, right? So there needs to be a way to explain the background to the public and then frame up the issue so that they have, you know, something to comment on.
Oh, well, the simplest way, I'm not suggesting that this is the best way for the public listening session, but the simplest way is to show the current document, the current charter. I mean, that's what we're focused on. Current language in the charter, pick out the major points in the charter as it currently stands, and then compare it to a second column, perhaps, compare it to what's going on, what the current status is. And that gives a clear picture as to what potential changes need to be made to bring the charter up to date.
I'd rather go with Dylan's 2 questions personally.
Okay.
I mean, I think, you know, it's the amount of work you expect that, you know, who's your target audience? I mean, there's the general public, and then there's people who tend to focus on, you know, these kinds of financial policy questions. I mean, you may get interest from both, but I think you have to frame the document so that the member of the general public could read it and understand it. And then the folks who are financial experts who, you know, take an interest in these issues, they will get it. I mean, I think they will.
Okay, but I think to answer your question, Jim, I think, you know, it's doable to put together some broad language that could be presented, you know, a question for the listening session, you know, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe have 2 or 3 options for the commission to look at. And then the commission could pick the best option and use that as the basis for the listening session.
Do I hear you volunteering?
Well, I'm assuming, you know, it'll be kind of you know, the usual suspects here, but sure. Yeah.
So I guess if you give us a target date on when you think you would have something, I'm certainly, you know, as chair, willing to go through it, review it, add my imprint to it, or suggestions, and circulate it for, you know, some sort of a consensus agreement. I will consult our council staff on the legalities of circulating documents for what I call notation review, which is not, we're not going to sit down in a room together and vote, but we will circulate it around for people to individually weigh in on. That sounds like it complies with the public meeting
That's more than
laws.
fine. Just don't reply all, reply just to Jim. We'll send out
I used to call it notation voting, but like I said, there has to be enough time to actually get it out very early November so that the public is, you know,
And I would
some
think,
opportunity.
it should be finalized probably 3 days before you want it to go out. Because we got
There's a 3-day turnaround in the council.
probably faster, but you know, I do want to give that.
I
to
appreciate that.
our communications office.
So
Is there a sample that has been used before that has been effective that we could look at so that we have something to, you know, format our approach around?
You mean sample in terms of a listening session?
Yeah.
Because we did one, our last listening session was March 6th, I think, of 2024.
About, I would be able to.
Yeah, and so we did, I think we published that notice in January or February, right? There is a notice up there.
Can someone send that to the whole group?
I'm searching the press releases we've done in the past for the charter review. I'll send a few
Okay.
Thank you.
for the.
Somewhere, there's actually, I think if you browse around our webpage, there's probably a link there somewhere if you.
There is. There's.
So
Yeah.
the other thing I would like to bring up to put on the table. So first of all, I would suggest that we keep our language as unprescriptive as possible because we're not in consensus here. There's clearly differing views. They're subtle, but there's differing views, and we don't need to decide anything at this point. The other thing I would like to put on the table is so I suggested 2 areas, but I'd like to suggest a third. So the areas I suggested was, you know, we're thinking about the issue of a minimum in the charter. We're thinking about a process in the charter, and then I think we should add what David had brought up. We're also thinking about the need for risk management reviews and reserve reviews. We don't need to say every 6 years, every 4 years, every 22 years. We should just say we're thinking about these 3 areas and we want your input on these 3 areas, because we don't want to prejudge what other people come to the table with. They might have much better ideas than we have. Well, they might have much worse ideas, but they might have much better ideas. Let's assume they're going to be really smart and bring something brilliant to the table. So, but I think adding in that the review question that David brought up just now is a really good one, because that's another one of those risk management sort of, you know, we don't know what we don't know, so let's have some smart people. Let's have a requirement for a process to have smart people think about it before it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a good separation of the risk management versus capital expenditures, which we know, for sure. We just don't know when we'll need to use those funds, but we know that buildings aren't going to last forever and, all that kind of stuff.
They do a 5-year capital plan, so I'm sure that they're planning for capital way better than they're planning for unintended, unexpected emergencies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we just have not had a chance yet to get better information on how that works. And, we were hoping to have a meeting on that to get a better understanding. One of my concerns as we prepare something to give to the public is that we not misrepresent the current situation in terms of what the council does and what the executive does in relation to this issue, that we're not trying to create a boogeyman that doesn't exist. We just want to raise the issue for these structural reasons, not necessarily trying to point a finger or say that we're doing things totally wrong, but that we want to get the public's understanding of how they would like it to work.
Yeah, I'm going to raise something here that I'm reluctant to raise, but I was reminded of this last night when somebody in my household said, "When is this commission done?" Because I was setting the alarm for 6:20 this morning. So yeah, I'm reminded. We have actually another year. This commission is not finished until the end of November of next year. I know our report is due, by April 30th. If for whatever reason we feel that we haven't finished studying an issue and it can't be included in that report in the way we want it to be, we have permission to continue on and for the rest of that year and through November and continue to study an issue. And if we want to issue a supplemental report, we can do it. We have, the door's kind of open for us. We have a minimum requirement of one more report before May 1, but we can continue. So if that's where we go, that's where we go. That's going to be up to, us and to you folks. All right. So
how about we make a commitment, Mike, Dave and I make a commitment that within the next week, we will get within 1 week of getting the materials, the samples, we will get back to Jim with a sample.
Even sent them.
Consider it finished. We won't consider it, the be all and end all, but we'll just have something that then people can chop on.
Dylan, Steven just sent it, so you got it in your inbox.
Okay, so within 1 week of today, then, and that seems reasonable. We're gonna come together. The three of us will come together. We'll send emails to each other with, "Hey, this looks like a good press release kind of announcement."
Mm-hmm.
Get it with the sort of vague 3 areas, keeping it very general, not making like David said, we're not here to point fingers at anyone. We're just simply to bring up the issue and get people's opinion on the issue.
So we are on track then. It sounds like we are on track to use the November 19th hearing date. And then, the good news is if we want another one in January, we can do that too, right? The advantage of having one early is you can have a second one late. So all right. So we will proceed that way. Anything else anybody thinks we should discuss along these lines on this topic?
And I think, in the past, I think they have had like a broad listening session before the questions narrowed, and then question being narrowed down to what you intend to,
Yeah,
and then have a
if we
listening
narrow the
session.
question down in time,
Yeah.
we could have another listening session, like we said, in late February or so.
Exactly. I think I've seen that happen in the past.
Okay, thank you. Oh, great. It's a great discussion. We had a real vigorous debate. It was really worthwhile. Staff updates or comments? Anything to report?
No mail. I'm sorry. I will get you guys hooked up with Gene if that is still what you want. I had a little trouble. And I dropped the ball a little bit on getting it scheduled with him, but he came by the other day. So hopefully some point in the next week and a half, we can schedule some time with Gene. Otherwise, no mail has come in. I just distributed around links to press releases that have been done under this CRC and an example for a listening session one from the previous Charter Review Commission. Hope that can guide you guys in any way to drafting this up. As I mentioned, please just reply directly to Jim. He can compile everything. Don't reply all. But that is more than fine to use email in that way, as long as there's no ongoing conversation with, a quorum of members.
Stephen, can I ask,
Sure.
last time I sent my availability for the couple of weeks, I'll do that again. Should I send that to you or Jim?
You can send that to me. Yeah, and if you have any updated availability, I know Mondays and Fridays seem to work the best with everybody. And Gene said that was fine with him. I just have to work on finding something on his calendar when he's free, but
Okay.
And your work group has 4, which is less than a quorum. So your
Yeah.
work group can feel free to reply to each other as 4, because the 4 is not.
Could I- Jim, could I ask a question? I think I see Dale sitting in the back. We've asked, associated with reserve studies, et cetera, to get together with perhaps some people from the budgeting office and the executive's office. Would that be possible in the next month or so?
Yes, it is. I talked to Mike Coviu, the Director of Finance, and somehow we had miscommunication. He was available for the last Charter Review Commission, and he said, well, I didn't get it. Was that probably fell on me as to not get the proper communication. So we can get Mike Coviu, Rachel Selberman, who is our CIP person from the Office of Management and Budget that looks at the 6-year CIP, all of the planned capital expenditures, the life cycle of our buildings, which also David Dice from General Services looks at. We have it planned out. Our transportation folks have planned out our bridges, roads, and all of those other sorts of facilities. So there is planning for air conditioning replacement, fleet replacement. All of those things go into our CIP budget. So Rachel and David are the 2 that cover that. And Luke from our Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management does the emergency management plans. And we have plans for continuation operations of service in the case of catastrophic emergencies. So there is that planning that's going on as well. Maybe what isn't attached, I don't know the extent to which those plans are public because of security concerns, but that does indeed go on. So those are the 4 people I think that would be appropriate for at least the subcommittee to meet with, if not the full commission to meet with before or at the next charter review meeting.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Would it be helpful for us to send you the list of questions, the few questions we might have?
What the list that you had ran off in the beginning, that would certainly be a great start yes, that would be great. And as you know, the council and the executive discussed the reserves very explicitly in the budgeting process. This year, the budget and the executive sent over the budget and explicitly says, and reserves are set, I've carved out 11% for reserves. That's the combination of the two different reserve funds, the charter specified one and the legislatively reserved. And then the council deliberately discusses that, and at the end of the budget, they say our reserve policy is this. The charter reserves, the undesignated reserves, are the ones that we tap into. It's less than 5% for those unanticipated but not catastrophic emergencies. We have not had to tap into the other reserves, which have a very strict policy of how you can get to those funds. It's if it is, we drop off the cliff in a recession, we have catastrophic weather event, then the council through super majority policy processes can access those funds. So that would be something to have Mike and others spell out for the commission here.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll send you an email with our schedule and, you know, any additional questions. And we'll get those.
Again,
meetings.
we can do the subcommittee meeting with these folks, and then also if they're available on the 12th is the next commission meeting.
Okay, one caveat, I do plan after we have our new members confirmed, I do plan to reach out to them individually and talk to them. And that probably will happen before we get this document out, so they will become part of the process. Whether they choose to, abstain or involve themselves, that's up to them. I am going to ask them if any of them are interested in attending our next meeting in person, so that we can actually get acquainted in person. If they choose to participate online like y'all did this morning, then I'll let you know. But if they're going to be here in person, I will let you all know, just so that you have the opportunity to come in person and meet them if you want to do that. So I will be here, of course. Anything else anybody needs to raise or discuss before we adjourn? If not, we'll consider us an adjournment by unanimous consent. Thank you.
Thank you. Great meetings.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, Dale, everyone.